Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings. I am Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. What a week. Good Friday to you. Lamar Alexander is going to vote against new witnesses, is going to vote to bring this impeachment sham to a conclusion. Senator Alexander is a great American, has always been a great American, whether as governor, as Secretary of Education, as a senator. He's always put the interests of the country ahead of himself and ahead of Tennessee even. He is a great senator. Making a great move. This will be over by tonight, I believe, and that's good because earlier this morning, Singapore closed its borders to all Chinese travelers. Singapore closed its borders to all Chinese travelers. Before I go to the impeachment sham, because that's not a story because we know how it's going to end, let's go to the epidemic. From the New York Times, coronavirus live updates. State Department tells Americans, do not go to China. New York Times, more than 200 people have died, 9,800 infections. Bigger than SARS now. Facebook says it will stop to act coronavirus-related misinformation. The first 2 confirmed cases have come to Britain. China is bringing home Wuhan residents from foreign countries. That's odd. And after a false alarm on a cruise ship, Italy had to report its first case anyway, and the WHO declares what we already knew. The coronavirus is a global health emergency. This from the Wall Street Journal. The World Health Organization declared the coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern Thursday as the first person-to-person transmission of the virus was reported in the United States. That happened in Chicago, where the husband of a wife who had returned with the virus from Wuhan got it from her. They're both in isolation. There are 6 cases in the United States. We don't have a problem here yet. We're on alert. But, boy, does China have a problem. They are screwed. And I do not know. My biggest fear is that it gets to Africa or to a refugee camp where there simply is not the medical staff necessary to contain or any possibility of isolating people. If it gets into the great slums of the world in India or in some of the tenements of China, there's just going to be no stopping it. 2 new cases of coronavirus in the United Kingdom. I've been reading the book, The Great Influenza. And it's scary what happened in 1918 and 1920. I don't think we're going to have that because we have better science, we have better techniques to identify, quarantine, better ability to rapidly develop antivirals, better ability to rapidly develop a vaccine. But some places are going to get the living daylights kicked out of them, China being number 1. I note a story as well from 2 days ago, it's the 29th. Global box office could take a multi-billion-dollar hit. Yep, people aren't going to go to theaters in China, that's for sure. I went and saw Just Mercy 2 days ago, so I don't think Americans are going to stop going to see movies. There are a number of people there. Sonny Bunch will be along. Can I pause for a moment and tell you that SusanCollins.com is where you ought to go. Susan Collins is my new hero. And if I were not an NBC consultant, analyst, and a Washington Post contributing consultant, I can't contribute to campaigns. I can't appear at fundraisers. Those are the rules of the road. I'd be giving her money. I think the fetching Mrs. Hewitt will be giving her money today. She's not bound by my rules. She's been receiving so much hate from the left. She voted for Brett Kavanaugh, and now she's been fair in the impeachment trial, which will be over today. Thanks to Lamar Alexander, it's impossible to call witnesses. That means they'll move. They had final arguments last night. They almost had, it's just so crazy. Nancy Pelosi has given up. I'll come back to Susan Collins in a second. Nancy Pelosi has given up, and so she's got her new line down, cut number 10.
Well, he will not be acquitted. You cannot be acquitted if you don't have a trial. And you don't have a trial if you don't have witnesses and documentation and that. I would hope that the senators, if it comes to a tie or if there's a question of hearing testimony or receiving documents, would leave it up.
Can we say poor loser? Is there some way to play?
Oh, I'll play your game, you rogue.
I am telling you, you are the worst example for American youngsters watching. You got beat. Nancy Pelosi, and you come back with me. That's what that is. It's just me. But that's not as bad as the vile hatred flowing down on Susan Collins. Today's Wall Street Journal has an editorial. Verbal abuse sometimes has a way of stiffening the spine, the journal begins. That seems to be the case for Senator Susan Collins, the moderate Republican from Maine. And I'm on right now in Portland and other places in Maine. So I love your senator. Bravo, Susan Collins. I go up there a lot. I always tell people, buy sea bags. I tell people, eat lobster, do whatever. Get to Maine. You'll love Maine. The journal continues, with the debate on impeachment getting white hot, Ms. Collins' office has released a sample of the appalling voicemails being left for her. Roughly 1 out of every 25 callers sounds like this. Male voice. Quote, wow, what a vile piece of garbage you are, Susan Collins. Sorry. But those of us with a brain in the United States, which is about more than half of the country, see exactly what the president did. I sure hope you didn't breed. I sure hope you don't have children or grandchildren because their future is blank. Female voice. You're going to lose, Susan Collins. You're going to lose. You're just a little B blank for Donald Trump. Expletive you. Female voice. Why are you obstructing justice? It is because you want to go to hell? Are you in some kind of satanic cult? I don't understand why you're doing the devil's work. Why are you so corrupt? Oh, right, because you've always been a stupid, dumb B blank. Male voice. You're a half-pint little blank, cross-eyed blank with a voice impediment. You're a disgrace to this country, not just to the Senate, but to your country. You're a traitor. More profanity. Some of the language is unprintably worse. At least one message was threatening enough to merit a referral to law enforcement. What did these callers not get about Susan Collins? She also received a vulgar barrage in 2018 when Justice Brett Kavanaugh was up for Senate confirmation. People mailed her office thousands of coat hangers. There's a gruesome commentary on abortion rights. Yet after looking at all the evidence, Ms. Collins made an independent judgment and voted to confirm. Ms. Collins might be labeled a moderate, but that doesn't mean she can be pushed around. She can't be pushed around. She's a Mainer. To live up there means you're not really normal to begin with. You're tough. You're made of leather. You eat lobsters on the shell. You get in those funny little boats out there. They go ding, 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 ding. I mean, Maine, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law live in Maine. And so I go up there occasionally. Please do me a favor and go to senatorcollins.com. $5, $10, $100. I think the maximum is $2,400. senatorcollins.com. My other hero of the day is Chief Justice John Roberts. Let's play cut 31. You need to actually watch this on the universe to see the stare, but let's just play cut 31.
The question from Senator Johnson and the other senators for both parties. Recent reporting described 2 NSC staff holdovers from the Obama administration attending an all-hands meeting.
I got the wrong one. I want to play cut 34. Chief Justice on cut 34.
The question from Senator Warren is for the House managers. At a time when large majorities of Americans have lost faith in government, does the fact that the Chief Justice is presiding over an impeachment trial in which Republican senators have thus far refused to allow witnesses or evidence contribute to the loss of legitimacy of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Constitution?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's still staring at Elizabeth Warren. That was it. The stare. It was, give him a black hat and he's Darth Vader. And the captain on the ship is being lifted out of his seat, choking. John Roberts, if stares could reduce senators to pile of ash, Liz Warren would be, it was the perfect transmittal of contempt mixed with not a little pity for a grandstanding alleged Harvard law professor who has just attacked the court that John Roberts defends with his life, sometimes to the anger of the left, sometimes to the anger of the right, but he has dedicated his life to it. It's a personal attack from a political actor whose campaign is falling apart, and it's withering. I've never seen anything as withering. So Susan Collins, John Roberts, good on you. When we come back, Amazon is soaring. It's the new reserve currency, I think. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, little Lola. Why? Because sometimes things aren't what they seem. One of the greatest running songs ever invented. If you're going out tomorrow morning, put this on with Toto from Africa. Now, today we're going to see a very interesting thing. Keep going my Lola music here. I want to explain. Lola is not actually a girl. I think you know that, right? Did you know that, Dwayne? Are you shocked?
Yeah, I did know that.
You did know that. The whole thing, the scandalous part of the song by the Kinks is that Lola is not a woman. He's fallen for Lola.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but do you know that sometimes stocks, which are thought to be risky compared to government bonds, become reserve currencies that are safer than government bonds? I'm bringing you the pre-market report brought to you by Birch Gold Group, HughGold.com, HughGold.com. Or you can call Birch at 800-434-GOLD, 800-434-GOLD. They do two things. They sell you bullion. That means Maple Leafs, Krugerrands, Eagles. Got to make an order of $5,000 or more. They don't do small orders. Or move part of your IRA, 401k. Those who did this with me earlier are very happy they did this. Very, very happy as the coronavirus shocks the world and global markets. Gold this morning is at $1,578. And if you had made your move last year when it was in the 13s and 14s, you'd be really happy. But a lot of people think it's going to go higher as coronavirus spreads. But the Birch Gold people will take care of you, whether you want to move and diversify your IRA, or if you want to simply buy gold and put it in a safety deposit box somewhere, don't keep it at home. 800-434-GOLD, 800-434-GOLD. Now, over at the markets, overnight in China, not surprisingly, Hong Kong dropped another 0.5%. Interestingly, Japan rebounded 1%, meaning that they think they got this under control in Japan. Singapore has shut down. You can't get into Singapore if you're from China. You're going to have to sneak in. But China is China, and you can go wherever you want. If you're going to lose, if you can get out of Wuhan, you're getting out of Wuhan. It's the emptiest city I've ever seen of 11 million or 17 or whatever million people. They've got so many millions of people on lockdown. The 10-year Treasury in the United States is down to 1.56%. Because when people get scared, they put it into 10-year Treasuries, maybe 30-year Treasuries, which are at 2%. Maybe a 3-month Treasury, which is at 1.53%. But usually the 10-year Treasury is the safe place to put money. Or they put it into government bond funds, etc. I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think Amazon has become the world's reserve currency because it does cloud computing and it delivers. Who's going to win if there's a pandemic? I told you yesterday. Amazon, Netflix, things that you don't have to go outside for. If every country became China, and God, please no. I have read enough of the great influenza already, and I'm about halfway through. You don't want to have a pandemic. It's ugly. But Amazon reported its earnings yesterday. I own Amazon, so I'm a happy man. It was up $12.68 yesterday, and in pre-market trading, it's up $162 to $2,033 a share. So it's more expensive than gold. A share of Amazon costs more than an ounce of gold, and that's because it's diversified and it's growing. And it's doing this in the face of markets that are generally down. The NASDAQ futures are down 51 right now. The Dow futures are down 144. The S&P futures are down 16 because they're afraid of coronavirus. And Amazon is up 162. Like Lola, a stock is becoming a bond. That's what I think. But don't trust me. Trust your broker. Call Birch Gold. HughGold.com, HughGold.com. or 800-434-GOLD. Coming right back. More news of the wind down, the collapse of the impeachment fraud yesterday in the Senate, plus Sonny Bunch on the movies when we return to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I don't know about you, America, but Sonny Bunch makes me think of the Monkees. He is the official film critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show, and he's a happy man most of the time. He is, however, here to tell us about coronavirus. He's our first coronavirus expert of the morning. Good morning, Sonny Bunch.
Hi, how are you?
What was that? What was that bing in the back? Did I win something?
Oh, no, sorry, that was my email.
Oh,
my email is binging and bonging.
I thought it was like on the old Groucho show, you got a prize whenever you heard bing. You used the secret word.
No, that's the coronavirus alert.
Okay,
it's here.
It's here.
It's here.
You know, I'm not laughing. There are 9,000 people who are sick in China, and there are 5 people. But the box office in China has crumbled, Sonny. Did you read the stories?
Yeah, I saw that the worldwide box office is going to take a bit of a hit because they're quarantining all of the public spaces. It's it's no joke.
It's not. I managed to get out and see, however, this week, Just Mercy and the new Guy Ritchie gangster pick. The Gentleman. What are you telling us about this week?
I wanted to talk a little bit about The Gentleman because I am a big Guy Ritchie fan.
You and me both.
Especially in this British gangster mode. And I did finally get a chance to see it this week. You know, it's funny. You move across country and all of a sudden it's really hard to get to the movies. But I did finally catch it this weekend. And I quite liked it. I liked it a lot. It's so Guy Ritchie has essentially 2 modes, right? He has his big budget studio spectacular mode. He directed the Aladdin live action remake that came out last year, and he also made the King Arthur movie starring Charlie Hunnam that came out a couple of years ago, and that was a tremendous bomb, just a total disaster at the box office. And on top of that, he's also done what The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with Armie Hammer and Henry Cavill, which was fun. A lot of people missed that one. But so he has that kind of big budget box office studio spectacular mode that he works in. But the mode I prefer is his kind of smaller British gangster mode, and that is Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, and Revolver, which was kind of a disaster, but at least a somewhat interesting one.
And for those who don't know, if I had a producer, I would play one of the sound effects we have, which is Dennis Farina returning in Snatch from London, being asked whether or not he has anything to declare. We'll probably play that at some moment going forward. I love Snatch, Sonny. It's one of my favorites.
One of my favorites. One of my absolute favorites.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah, one of my favorites. I love it, and The Gentleman is very much in that mode. So it's definitely an interesting film insofar as it is it's a movie from an older and wiser and a little bit calmer filmmaker than Snatch. So The Gentleman is about a drug dealer named Mickey, played by Matthew McConaughey, who is trying to get out of the drug dealing business. He runs the weed game in all of England. And he wants to get out. He wants to sell his business and retire and become a respectable member of society. And the film kind of chronicles the efforts to double cross him and keep him from doing that. It is in the Ritchie manner of movie making. It is filled with subplots that kind of converge at the end, and it's filled with little cameo appearances and fun big names showing up for small parts. Colin Farrell is in this movie in a bit part. He's very good as a boxing coach.
He's terrific and he's more than a boxing coach, though. I mean, he's an ominous. And I like the kids who are working out in his gym. Tell me about your assessment of Hugh Grant in this movie.
Hugh Grant is fantastic. Again, not exactly a bit part. He's kind of the narrator / storyteller of this movie. But he's quite fantastic as the British tabloid scummy journalist who kind of sets everything in motion and more or less plays the hand holder for the audience. He gets us through the story, but he has this kind of lilting tone that is amusingly kind of fey, and he is he's quite funny in this. Charlie Hunnam, who I sometimes have a problem with, is quite good in this role. It's the natural role for him as kind of a posh thug, if you will. He has kind of an upper class manner to him, but
I want his grill.
Still prone to violence.
Don't you want his grill?
Fantastic grill. In this movie, he has a smokeless grill that doubles as a foot warmer.
I think it's going to come from besthotgrills.com. Besthotgrills.com is the sponsor of our show, and I'm going to ask Rhett Rasmussen, who runs it, if he can get that grill from us. But go forward and tell me now about the key thing, Matthew McConaughey. He is something of an... I've never heard you talk about him. He does every kind of role. What do you think of him?
Well, Matthew McConaughey, 5 or 6 years ago, there was the McConaissance, right? There was a moment where Matthew McConaughey was in a bunch of stuff, and he was winning awards. He was in True Detective. He was in, he won an Oscar for the Dallas Buyers Club, and people were all excited about the McConaissance. And then he made a series of choices for films that were not necessarily the best. From a box office perspective, but they were all pretty interesting. And this is kind of the McConaughey riddle, is that he makes movies that aren't necessarily going to be huge hits, but are still quite good and interesting. For instance, The Gentleman did not do particularly well at the box office. I think it grossed $13 million or something like that last weekend. It's probably gonna dip pretty hardly.
I think it's going to get legs. This week, I think it's going to get legs when people hear people like you and me saying it's Snatch, it's Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and that Rebel Media believes it is. What's your term for movies that you like?
Rebeller Media. It's outlaw cinema.
Do you think Gentleman is outlaw cinema?
100% outlaw cinema. It was funny. Some of my coworkers came out of one of the press screenings last week, and they were like, "Yeah, this is going to be a big hit with our people, with our audience. It's definitely outlaw cinema."
Rebellermedia.com, or follow it at Rebeller on Twitter. On Twitter, is it just Rebeller, or is it Rebeller Media on Twitter?
Just Rebeller.
Okay. And by the way, are they still giving away the discount that I did not get when you used my name, which I was not told about?
If you if you go to the website and you read one of the original articles and you hit a paywall, there's a free option if you want to sign up and read. I think you get 3 free stories a month. But if you want to sign up for the whole thing, the code Hugh will save you 15%.
Didn't save me 15%. No one told me about it. But I digress. I digress.
Hugh, it's funny. Speaking of the website, I saw everybody talking about this new thing from News Corp, News, KNEWZ, yesterday. And I was kind of like, what is this exactly? And it struck me that they're doing essentially the same thing that we're doing at Rebeller, weirdly. So News is like a news aggregation site that is kind of Drudge Report-like insofar as they're pulling headlines and sending people off of the site. And that is basically what we do at Rebeller on the top half of the website, just all about movie news. It's like we pull industry news and essays and stuff and put it there for people to check out every morning. That's actually what I spend most of my mornings doing is aggregating for this
Have
site.
You actually moved? Have you left the Commonwealth?
I have. I am in Dallas, Texas, as we speak.
You're a Texan?
I spent that. Well, not yet. I still have to. I don't think you're officially a Texan until you change your car registration.
And you have to make outsized claims about everything, and you have to ignore the Astros cheating.
Yeah, well, I live in Dallas, so we don't care about Houston.
Okay.
We're Rangers fans here, I think.
Well, good luck to you on that one, pal. Now, so tell me, other than The Gentleman, which you're giving a thumbs up to, like I am.
Big thumbs up.
What did you see? Did you see Just Mercy, which we loved, The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, but I'm a lawyer, so I can understand. I think trial movies are terribly difficult to make interesting, and I haven't seen anything else. So what else are you recommending this weekend?
Well, as I said, it's been hard to get to the theaters. The good thing is, because it is the weekend before, or I guess it's Super Bowl weekend, so a lot of studios kind of avoid releasing anything particularly big or interesting. For instance, Hugh, have you heard of the Rhythm section?
I have. I don't think, based upon the trailer, The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt says, I ain't seeing that one.
Yeah, here's the tagline. A woman seeks revenge against those who orchestrated a plane crash that killed her family. It is. It's getting kind of buried this weekend. It's coming out wide. There's also a Gretel and Hansel R-rated horror movie. Would you like to see that one, Hugh?
That is not on my watch list ever. Isn't it reverse? Isn't it Gretel and Hansel?
Yes, it's Gretel and Hansel. It is actually PG-13. It's not R-rated.
Would you tell me? I have a question. Dark. This is important. There's a movie called The Last Full Measure, which is they're like billboards for it in the theater. I've never heard of it. It's got a big cast. Is it that much of a disaster?
Well, it debuted at, I want to say it debuted at Sundance last week, and it got very, very mixed reviews. So it hasn't screened for critics outside of the festival circuit. So I don't know for sure yet, but it has gotten pretty mixed reviews. The sense I get is that it's deeply earnest, and how much your tolerance for this sort of thing, how far that goes depends on how much you can put up with, like, earnest.
Samuel L. Jackson, Christopher Plummer. I mean, these are William Hurt. These are not Ed Harris is in it. These are not small names. Jeremy Irvin.
They're not small names, and it debuted at Sundance. I think the studio thought they had a real firecracker on their hands, but the things I have heard have been decidedly mixed. So I think one thing we should talk about is how 1917 is 100% the front runner for Best Picture at the Oscars.
Are you going with that? Are you betting on that? That's wrong. It should be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I would vote for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
It should be, but 1917 has now won the Producers Guild Award and the Directors Guild Award. And the only reason I think it did not win the SAG Award is because it only really has 2 actors in it, and neither of them are big names. So I think it is pretty much a surefire thing at this point.
All right, we have 1 minute left, Sonny Bunch. Yeah. In terms of moving to Dallas, and you mentioned the movie Shortage Theater. Do they have art houses? Do they have art?
They have lots of art houses. They also the local theater chain, the Alamo Draft House, is very good on smaller movies and prestige pictures.
Okay, good. I'll ask my friend Mark Davis, but I actually don't think they go to the pictures in Texas unless you can shoot beforehand. I believe that is the case.
Yeah, you go to the gun range first.
And then you sit down and enjoy a cold one as you watch a movie. Sonny Bunch, rebellermedia.com. Go use my code Hugh. Get the money I didn't get. Save your stuff. And Sonny will be back next week. Time for ReliefFactor.com. ReliefFactor.com is what I take every day, especially on the weekend. Tomorrow morning's the long run day. It'll hopefully be a beautiful day in Huntington Beach. Going to go down to Huntington Beach. My 4 pills. I take them every morning this time. With my lukewarm coffee, which is actually tepid this morning. It's not stone cold. I've been in the studio for 45 minutes. Ben won't bring me any coffee, so I'm absolutely on my own. Nevertheless, not his job. His job is to talk to you. My job is to tell you about ReliefFactor.com. 4 pills that if you take them every day, you'll have the body's necessary supply of Vicarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, the 4 natural supplements that keep you moving. They support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise. I think I'm doing 8 tomorrow. Talked to a lady today who's training up for the LA Marathon, which is mid-March. She's doing an 18-miler this weekend. I told her ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. You can go get it, $19.95. Coming back with the Poet Laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show on our Friday show. Coronavirus is everywhere, but a little bit of verse we need, especially on a week that began so sadly. Stay tuned. Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Hugh. You know, in a week filled with news, peace plans, and trade agreements and impeachment, in Los Angeles, there's only one story. When looking at the accolades one goes through life amassing, we ponder passing greatness when we witness greatness passing. As if, amid our day-to-day, we all need the reminding, some burn for just a moment with a light that's matchstick blinding. To get the world's attention, my friends, that's no mean feat. To win a time of chill and drear, to give off light and heat, to offer inspiration, to see the contest done, and in that crucial moment, to be the chosen one. To struggle in the spotlight that sees our every flaw, to know the mansion that you've built can blow away like straw. To sin and be forgiven, but never to forget. To wake up every daybreak and daily bear your debt. To set down your instructions and ponder every letter. To follow them the best you can, and next day, do it better. And when one day all disappears, our souls are shaken. How terrible to be so strong and see life quickly taken. There are no easy answers, no solace I can give, except to say, my friends and foes, that while you're living, live. That's Greatness Passing by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, that's beautiful. And it's a very sad week, and it remains a very sad week in Southern California, but that's a very inspired poem. It will be at tarzanajoe.com, I assume?
It will be you.
Thank you, Joe. And again, if anyone has a poetry need for an occasion, joyful or sadness, somewhat nostalgic or somewhere in between, you can write Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com. All available all the time. Like he's 24/7, right? 365, Joe.
Absolutely.
tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, you.
I don't know if any of you have seen the new Amazon ad for the Super Bowl. Have you seen it touting Alexa? You have to watch it. I'm not going to give it away. It's funny. Very funny, actually. It's also fake history. But it's funny. In the future, Alexa, do we have our Alexa in here, Generalissimo? No, you took it home?
I didn't take it home. It got disconnected for that unit that you've got in front of you that you like hitting sound things off of.
Oh, I do like hitting sound things in here. In fact, there were a few today that I hadn't played in a long time.
Oh, I'll play your game, you rogue.
So anyway, the new Amazon Alexa Super Bowl ad is very, very funny, but it's also fake history. So in the future, we'll say, Alexa, what is fake history? And Alexa will say, my Super Bowl ad from 2020 is fake history. That's in the future. And it's funny, but it's fake history. You should understand that. You know who else is fake? Adam Schiff. He's pretended all along that he had a case, and he got his dander up yesterday. I love this part. He got his dander up. Adam Schiff got his dander up. Cut number 26.
First of all, there have been a lot of attacks on my staff. And as I said when this issue came up earlier, I'm appalled at some of the smearing of the professional people that work for the Intelligence Committee. Now, this question refers to allegations in a newspaper article which are circulating smears on my staff and ask me to respond to those smears. And I will not dignify those smears on my staff by giving them any credence whatsoever, nor will I share any information that I believe could or could not lead to the identification of the whistleblower.
Stop. What, you know why he's doing this? It's because the whistleblower and his staff are joined at the hip, and they cook this whole thing up. The scandal here is it's all a cook job from bitter Obama staffers who scattered from the NSC back to the Central Intelligence Agency and over to the House Intelligence Committee, and they cooked this whole deal up. So there will be books written. Everybody knows. I don't use his name because I'm just not going to get into the middle of that. Neither would the Chief Justice. Why bother? Everybody knows it. No need to. It's just a total sham impeachment built upon a fake whistleblower who isn't a whistleblower. used false allegations, coordinated with Schiff and his staff, but Adam Schiff is upset. Let me do a pre-market report again. We got coronavirus hitting 10,000 cases. We've got Singapore closing the country to all Chinese. The United States issuing its highest possible alert. The World Health Organization has said, danger, Will Robinson. Pre-market report brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com. The only people who are winning here are Amazon investors and people who need to refinance their house. The 10-year Treasury is at 1.56%. That means that 15 and 30-year interest rates are really low. That's why you should call Andrew and Todd. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, and they lend you the money, 888-888-1172. Get started today. Lock in a rate if you can today, because these rates are low, and they might go a little bit lower next week, but you're not going to do much better than a 1.56% That's not your interest rate. You won't get that. That's the interest rate on which all interest rates are built, but you'll get the threes. You'll be in the 3% for 15 or 30 years. Help your son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter get into a house, because the stock market is going to be off to a rugged start. S&P down 17 and a quarter. The NASDAQ off 53. The down 162. Amazon, by contrast, is up $172 in pre-market trading. It's the new reserve currency. So safe money is flowing into Amazon in the 10-year, and you ought to be refinancing your house with AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. And you ought to be coming back to hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening today, the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Get ready for a great weekend. Impeachment will be over by the end of the weekend. Might be over today. They're going to vote on witnesses today. It will fail. There are only 3 at most Republicans who support witnesses. Senators Romney and Collins. And by the way, I think everyone ought to give Senator Collins money. SenatorCollins.com. I can't give her money. I work for NBC and the Washington Post as well as for Salem Radio and for other people. And I can't do political contributions. I can't even go to political fundraisers. But I can tell you, Senator Collins has been taking an enormous amount of abuse, an incredible amount of abuse, dating back to the Kavanaugh hearings. And she's got the toughest skin in the Senate. But the Democrats are trying to take her out because she has got tough skin and thinks for herself. Maine will rally around her. She will win, but she's going to need money. SenatorCollins.com. Today is the day they vote. And there will be no witnesses. And then either they'll vote tonight to get it over with and acquit the president, or they'll vote to acquit the president tomorrow. McConnell wants this done. The president wants it done. The State of the Union is Saturday. And meanwhile, we got real issues. Coronavirus is now, you name the top level of alert that anyone in the world has, and they've got it. Don't believe people when they say don't panic. I don't believe in panic. I believe in facts. We got 10,000 cases, 200 deaths, 5 in the United States, domestic to domestic transition in the United States, 2 new cases in Great Britain. Singapore has said no thank you to new Chinese visitors, even though their economy is heavily dependent upon it. And we've got a mess on our hands. The market, let's start with the market. Pre-market report brought to you this morning by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian lend you money if you want to get money out of your house. You want to refinance it right now, consolidate debt. It's a great time to do it. It's a great time to do it because the 10-year Treasury has been dropping. It's down to 1.56% this morning. It's incredible. That means the 30-year and the 15-year mortgage that you can refinance or buy or rent or buy an investment property or help your child get into by becoming a co-borrowing, non-occupying owner is going to be in the 3s, maybe the mid-3s if you're doing a 15-year. I mean, just a deal. Just the best rate you'll ever see. But you got to call to get it started, 888-1172, AndrewandTodd.com. And I've known these guys Andrew's done all my loans forever. I've known Todd for 7 years, Andrew for 20 years. Andrew's in my Bible study when I was on the West Coast. You can trust them. People do. The markets this morning, except for Amazon, are getting hammered again. S&P down 17 points, NASDAQ down 51, the Dow down 137. Now, that is not actually hammered. Japan went up 1% overnight, and the Hong Kong bleeding is down a little bit. It only dropped 0.5%. And England's down about 1%, even though it's Brexit Day. We've waited forever for Brexit Day, but they screwed up the Huawei decision, and so they don't know whether or not they're going to get a deal. Mike Pompeo's over there saying, sure, everything's fine, not fine. But what we've got on our hands, we do look at Amazon. All right, so you can still win in the marketplace. Amazon at this hour is up $187 in pre-market trading, 10%. $187. I own Amazon. I'm a happy man. But it's the only stock I own. I used to only own, I'm not smart enough to trade, so I study and buy one stock at a time and put everything else in mutual funds where smart people run money. I'm not smart. It takes full time. Someone, you wouldn't let someone come in and broadcast. Well, actually, we've done that before with Kurt Schlichter and Joseph Timothy Cook. We've let people who've never broadcast before come behind the microphone, and sometimes they're really good and sometimes they're really bad. But I always say go to mutual funds or get a broker or somebody who knows what they're doing. Don't pick them yourself. You don't know anything. But they always say buy what you know. So I always believed in Amazon because they own everything, right? I see my wife buying everything on Amazon. I buy everything on Amazon. Well, guess what? When people don't go outside, they're going to buy stuff on Amazon. Now it's up $192. I'm watching on the screen. So the market, I don't know what it's going to do today, but I do know if you're going to refinance, now is the time to do it with AndrewandTodd.com if you have to consolidate debt, because the 10-year Treasury at 1.56%, just wow. 888-1172. Now, I want to go to the wrap-up last night. First of all, Jay Sekulow. Jay Sekulow stands up, explains the Biden rule on impeachment witnesses. You need to hear this. It's at almost the end of this long, drawn-out national nightmare in the Senate. Cut number 37, the president's lawyer, Jay Sekulow.
In a memorandum dated January 5th, 1999, that is captioned, Arguments in Support of Summary Impeachment Trial, Senator Biden discussed some history first regarding two Senate impeachment proceedings that were put forward in the Senate that were summarily decided. And this is what he said. These two cases demonstrate that the Senate may dismiss articles of impeachment without holding a full trial or taking any evidence. Put another way, the Constitution does not, impose on the Senate the duty to hold a trial. In fact, the Senate need not hold a trial even though the House wishes to present evidence and hold a full trial and the elements of jurisdiction are present. He went on to say, in a number of previous impeachment trials, the Senate has reached the judgment that its constitutional role as sole trier of impeachment does not require it to take new evidence or hear live witness testimony. This follows from the Senate's considerations for motions for summary disposition in at least three trials, and it listed the three trials of Judges Ritter, Claiborne, and Nixon. In each, the Senate considered a motion for summary disposition on the merits. In no case did the Senate decline to consider a motion for summary disposition as beyond the Senate's authority or forbidden by the Constitution. The framers did not mean that this political process was to be a partisan process. Instead, they meant it to be political in the higher sense. The process was to be conducted in the way that would best secure the public interest, or in their phrase, the general welfare. That was the Biden doctrine of impeachment proceedings. Now, some members in this chamber agreed with that. Some members that serve as managers also agreed with that. But now the rules are different. The rules are different because Manager Schiff just moments ago did what he's now famous for and created a conversation purportedly from the President of the United States regarding Russia hacking of Burisma. And he does the same thing he did when he started his hearings. So this is a common practice. But if we want to look at common practice and common procedures, the Biden rule is one. I'd like to address something else, because we've heard it time and time again about two judges have decided this issue of executive privilege. I want to address two things very quickly. My very first case at the Supreme Court of the United States, and it was a long time ago, over 30 years ago, 33 years ago. My client lost in the district court. They said, well, we'll appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, was not so successful. We didn't win there either. My client said, well, what do we do? I said, well, we have one option. We could file a petition for certiorari to the Supreme Court of the United States. Chances are they're not going to take the case. But at this point, it's an important issue to you, so why don't we proceed? My client agreed to proceed. A petition for certiorari was granted, and the court reversed 9-0 the Court of Appeals in the district court. And that's why you continue to utilize courts when appropriate. That's why you do it. And you don't rely on what a district court judge says. And the last thing I want to say, they are asking you, as a Senate body, to waive executive privilege on the President of the United States. Now, I want to think about that for a moment. They are asking you to vote to determine, or have the Chief Justice in his individual capacity as presiding judge, vote to waive executive privilege as it relates to the President of the United States. And that is what they think is the appropriate role for this proceeding to continue. I think you should adopt the Biden rule. Thank you.
I love that, the Biden rule. That was the second best moment of the night. I think that Jay Sekulow, who I've known a long time and is a superb lawyer, is upset that Pat Philbin is winning the MVP award. And it's a runaway. Everybody loves Pat Philbin. Sorry, Jay, you get the double up. You'll get a Golden Glove or something like that. But the moment of the thing that will be remembered is this. You can't even hear it. You have to see it. But let's play cut 34. The Chief Justice gets a question.
The question from Senator Warren is for the House managers. At a time when large majorities of Americans have lost faith in government, does the fact that the Chief Justice is presiding over an impeachment trial in which Republican senators have thus far refused to allow witnesses or evidence contribute to the loss of legitimacy of the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Constitution? 1, 2, 3, 4,
testify. The chief gives the death stare. If it's the Darth Vader, Chief Justice Darth Vader stares at Elizabeth Warren, who has just insulted him in the Supreme Court, and everybody in the Twitter world knew instantly she had made a terrible mistake. She lost votes at that moment. She lost respect at that moment. There is no more way to convey disdain and contempt, not mixed with a little bit of pity, just a tiny tincture of pity for Elizabeth Warren for asking the dumbest question in the history of the United States Senate. And the Chief Justice underscored that. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I don't believe in panic, America. It's Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. I believe in facts, and there's a great fact-based Twitter feed. Ari Schulman. And look, got a note from one of my buddies at the top of the government. None of the recommendations in previous articles about the failures of the CDC and the WHO during the Ebola problem of 2014 went to the fact that they did not respond in a timely manner to the concerns voiced by scientists and occupational safety researchers about the possible transmission of Ebola through the air and how best to guard it. Fundamentally, this problem is political, rooted in the desire of public health authorities to manage perceptions, to minimize panic, to avoid diplomatic problems, to not make elected officials look bad, and otherwise give the impression of being on the ball. No simple institutional rearrangement or procedural change will serve as a fix. A political problem requires a political solution. But vigorous oversight from the press and from elected officials can help rebalance priorities and reduce the likelihood that at least this particular problem will not recur. The welter of confusing science and bureaucratic squabbles does not have to be sorted out and adjudicated to appreciate two very basic principles. My government official colleague writes, first, err on the side of caution. As the Ontario Commission concluded, quote, reasonable efforts to reduce risk need not await scientific proof. Second, tell the truth. Seek what you don't know and admit it. The truth, the whole truth, is a greater ally than a half-truth against danger. So too in the long run, if not always, the short against fear. And I was directed to Ari Schulman. Here is the truth. They have a nightmare on their hands in China, and Singapore closing its borders to the Chinese tells you all you need to know. And we don't know how many Chinese sailors with the coronavirus are on merchant marine vessels that left from Wuhan the day before they figured this out. We don't know how many people are on airplanes. We don't know about those folks at March Air Force Base who are probably up in the middle of the night worried about when they're ever going to get home. And God, I'm praying for you. But someone wanted to leave March Air Force Base yesterday who'd been evacuated from Wuhan to Anchorage to March, and they're fine right now. Guess what? You do not get to leave. We don't even know what the R-OT is yet. We do know that the woman who came back from Wuhan gave it to her husband in Chicago, so we've got domestic transmission in the United States, 6 cases now. It's not a pandemic here. It is a bad situation in China, and we don't know. We think they're telling us more of the truth than normal, but we don't know. And therefore, everybody just kind of chill and watch, but report the news and get this silly impeachment thing over. And then I'm looking at Amazon. It's up 10% right now at 191. Why? Because if people don't go out, Amazon, which had amazing earnings, is going to get even higher. I don't know. Can a stock go up 20% in a day? I don't think it's up 10.28%. The stock market report, I got to always do this. The AndrewandTodd.com are sponsors of stock market reports. So when I bring you the stock market, AndrewandTodd.com, get the plug. And you should be refinancing your house at these interest rates. What's the 10-year Treasury at right now? 1.56. It hadn't moved yet. As people panic, they put their money into government bonds. They know the last thing to fall apart will be the United States Treasury, so they buy the United States Treasury. They don't want to have movie theaters in China stock right now. Dwayne's been asking me about, Kyle, how do I buy into movie theaters in China? And I tell him it's really not the way to go. And so you might want to buy a 10-year Treasury bond, or you might want to buy Amazon. But that's AndrewandTodd.com. You might really want to refinance your loan right now. 888-1172. They are lenders, not brokers, with Sierra Pacific. I got to close by talking about Chief Justice Roberts. I've known him a long time. We shared a suite for a year in the White House. I see him occasionally in White. He's not a close friend. He's just an acquaintance, an old colleague. He's funny as can be. He's the smartest guy. I've met 3 genuine geniuses in my life, Richard Nixon, Mitt Romney, and John Roberts. And when the Chief Justice put on his Darth Vader helmet, he didn't actually put on the helmet. He just put on the look. And you couldn't see Elizabeth Warren. There's only one camera. But I think she was like the captain in the first Star Wars. And then the chief let her go. Honestly, Elizabeth Warren, what a bad move. Joe Biden rule is dispositive. This thing should end today. I'll talk to Fred Barnes about it after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That is the theme song from The Alamo. The reason I'm playing it is Sonny Bunch just posted that there are many theaters in Dallas called the Alamo Draft House, which I think are just great until General Santa Ana comes over the wall and kills you all. Fred Barnes is my guest. You know Fred, longtime Beltway boy with Morton Kondracki, probably holds the most appearances on the Hugh Hewitt Show. He's been in hiding for a while. I don't know why. I don't know. Fred, where did you go? Have you been watching the Alamo on endless loop?
I love the Alamo, but I don't live in it. And but anyway, it's great to talk to you. I'm still alive. You know, the Weekly Standard folded, and I'm now writing a column a week for the Washington Examiner, and working on some book proposals. So I'm expected to be here a bit longer, meaning here on the earth.
We got to keep you back in our regular rotation because no one else is as bad at sports as I am other than you. You've got more losers than I do. You're a Redskins fan, a Washington Wizards fan. You root for the Virginia Cavaliers. You had your one moment in the sun like I did with the Cavs in 2016. Other than that, you're just as desperate a fan as I am.
One moment in the sun is all you need. I want more, but we've had one. And Virginia, it was, I'll have to say, in recent years, other than my family and my wife and my faith, Virginia winning the national championship was the biggest thing.
That, for me, the 2016 Cavs are it. But, of course, we go to the Super Bowl with the Browns next year, and I think we got World Series talent on the Indians. But, Fred, that's not why I've asked you here, nor the Alamo. I've asked you here to tell me what you think about this sham impeachment. We have a real serious crisis going on in the world. Tom Cotton figured it out. He went to the Senate Armed Services Committee and said, pounded on the table, Singapore has closed its borders to China. The world's kind of waking up. But we've got this sham impeachment. When does it end?
It may end today. I hope so. There's no reason to keep it going. I thought Lamar Alexander, the senator from Tennessee, had it just right. He'd been considering, I think sincerely, whether to bring any witnesses in, any more witnesses after the 17 that were interviewed in the House, and came to this conclusion. The president acted inappropriately, but this was not an impeachable offense, was not near it. And I think that's why the defense of the president by his lawyers was so good. They did both the facts and also stressed the law and came to the right conclusion. Lamar Alexander did, and their argument did, that this was not an impeachable offense. And of course, I'm talking about the abuse of power, the one about even meeting the Congress. That was preposterous in the first place.
Well, it was preposterous. I haven't written anything. I normally write for the Post once a week or so. I haven't written anything since the 21st. And the reason is I said everything that needed to be said, which was that the impeachment process hurts the presidency and the Constitution, and it should be stopped. I believe that has carried the day, except with Senators Collins and Romney. And I'm still urging people to give to Susan Collins because she's got quite the spine. She is taking so much heat and hate from the left, Fred Barnes. I've never seen anything like it.
I'd give her a pass, Hugh. I like Susan Collins. After her great speech in the Kavanaugh nomination for the Supreme Court, I went and talked to her. All my years in Washington, all her years in Washington, I had never met her. And I went and talked to her one-on-one for about an hour. She was fantastic. And, she was so brave in that. I'm willing to give her a pass.
Me too. I'm out raising money for her today. People go to senatorcollins.com because the Wall Street Journal has an editorial today. I did not know it had started again. I knew during the Kavanaugh hearing she had been the subject of abuse, but the death threats have begun again. The abuse have begun again. It's just crazy in that town.
Yeah, look, Republicans need her. The country needs her. Mitch McConnell needs her, and if she wants to vote for more witnesses, that's fine.
Did you happen to see Chief Justice Roberts do his best impersonation of Darth Vader in response to the Elizabeth Warren question. We couldn't see her, but if we could, it would have been like Star Wars 1, where the captain was being choked to death invisibly.
Well, Elizabeth Warren lived up to what I would expect. I mean, as much of a sham as the whole impeachment process was, she even cheapened that.
Yes,
with her question. And look, I was not worried about Roberts at all in that question. And there'd been at least one question, maybe more, about whether about trying to get Chief Justice Roberts to subpoena witnesses like John Bolton himself. And I think that would have been unconstitutional if you look at Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution. I mean, it's not he doesn't have that role. It would have been wrong.
No, he presides. He does not rule. This is supposed to keep the judiciary out of it. It's a pretty much basic con law question. Fred, this has taught me one thing, but I already knew it. Never play cards with Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. No, he's very lucky. Mitch McConnell, his greatest strength is his ability to bring his conference together and keep it there. He did it even when they were in the minority, and he's been doing it now. He spends more time with Susan Collins than any other senator, and she gets some rewards for that to help her get reelected and help the state of Maine. But he does bring them together, and I'm a great believer that politics is a team sport, and nobody plays it better than I've seen in my lifetime in Washington anyway than Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, great. Now let's talk about politics and disease. Number one, the disease is real. The virus is real. I just read an email from a friend, a senior senator involved in these matters, saying that WHO and the CDC are invested in not making elected officials look bad. They underplay panic for a reason. But the truth is the truth. The truth is China is in a mess. This is a bad deal, and they are in a bad place. Do you think our country is responding correctly at this point?
Well, I hope so. I'll have to say I really don't know. I mean, I'm more alarmed than I hear from CDC and politicians. I think this thing is really scary. It can kill so many people, and obviously, a communist country like China doesn't handle things like this well at all. They, because they're, if you're a communist, your chief goal is not worrying about whether your country has a horrible disease spreading like this and your people are safe and so on. You have other things that you're worried about. And China's been worried about being this big, powerful country and so on. And I think their healthcare system has just been horrible, and it continues to be. The Chinese are to blame for something terrible that's going on, and it's all over Asia now, of course, and we have to worry here badly. I hope we're up to it. I think we probably are, but that hasn't been proven yet.
No, and when we see Singapore, which is a very together place. I've read recently Robert Kaplan's Asia's Cauldron, A Little History of Singapore contained therein. When they shut their borders to all Chinese, that is a flare. They know China better than anybody. The late Lee Kuan Yew was the master of the PRC. Yep. He understood it, and he's passed that down. When they shut their borders, I think everybody in the world ought to shut their borders. And that's what I just think. I'd follow the Singapore here.
Oh yeah, no, I would follow Singapore too, and we ought to shut our borders and have no flights coming. I would say for a while here, let's have no flights coming in from Asia.
That's the Tom Cotton position from China. Yeah. You're a little bit more expansive.
China, from Asia. Obviously, we don't want any planes coming in from Wuhan province, but
yes,
I don't think we want them coming in from anywhere in Asia because it's spread everywhere in Asia. They're all and that, of course, has been documented. And this is, I can't remember anything quite like this in recent times.
Ebola in 2014 got people's attention, but it never got to this numbers. It's bigger than SARS now. Quickly, Fred, I need to get your opinion on what happens in Iowa on Tuesday. What do you think's coming?
I don't know. It's so hard to predict Iowa. I see that Bernie Sanders is ahead. I think these Democrats are all terrible candidates, and it may be a twofer for Donald Trump. He will. I suspect. I hope they vote today to acquit him, and then have Bernie Sanders win the Iowa primary on Monday. That's a twofer. Look,
I already voted for Bernie because I get my absentee ballot in Virginia. I'm not going to be there on March 3rd, so I got to vote in the open primary, and I voted for Bernie. I want a clear choice, Fred. I want the clearest choice possible on the ballot.
Yeah, you won't want it in which the Democrat will lose. Well, Bernie Sanders is that person.
Well, no, actually, I think Elizabeth Warren's easier to beat. If I was doing strategic voting, I think she's easier to beat.
Well, I think she's fairly easy to beat, but look, Trump still hasn't dealt with some of his problems that had Republicans fleeing. I live in Virginia, and I've seen Republicans flee from the party, and they did in 2018, and they did in 2019 in the state election, and a lot of it is because they just don't like Trump, and he's got to deal with that.
You're absolutely right, per usual. Fred Barnes, great to talk to you. Follow him on Twitter, at Fred Barnes, his column in the Washington Examiner. Don't listen to him on sports, but we still want to talk to him about politics. Great to have him back. Let me do a quick market update because all eyes are on the market, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com. They'll help you refinance your house, get money out of it, consolidate debt, or help your kid or grandkid take advantage of these incredible low rates to get into a house or a condo or a townhouse. Be a non-occupying co-borrower. Call Andrew and Todd at 888-888-1172. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They actually lend you the money. But the best thing to do is go to AndrewandTodd.com. Answer a couple questions they'll be back to. Yesterday, the Dow was up 124, the NASDAQ up 23, the S&P up 10. As calm descended about coronavirus, going to not be so calm today because China lost another 0.5% overnight. Japan gained 1% as they kind of figure they've got it contained in China, and that is at least the belief right now. It's going to be hell on China, but not so hellish everywhere else. But the S&P is down 12 this morning. The NASDAQ is off 24. The Dow is down 108. Amazon, however, is up at this hour in pre-trading. It is up $194, 10%. And guess what? If you're not going to go outside, you're going to use Amazon. That's why it's up. Honor-bound coffee, honor-bound coffee, honor-bound coffee. When you drink your coffee in the morning, be helping military families. Get your coffee not at the store. Get it from honorboundcoffee.com. And don't forget relieffactor.com as well. There it is. I'm holding it up. I took it last hour. If you're going to be a weekend warrior, going to go out for a long run, long walk, going to go to the gym tomorrow. It's Saturday. Going to start your New Year's resolution on the first day of February. Let me give you a preemptive rabbit. It's Brexit Day, January 31st, but it's also the eve of February. So those of you who had a New Year's resolution and screwed it up, start over tomorrow on February 1. It's a Saturday. Get out there and exercise if that's what you promised to do. And go order relieffactor.com because if you exercise for the first time, you'll be sore. But Relief Factor provides support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, the 4 natural supplements you ought to be taking. I take it every morning in the first hour, remind you about it in hours 2 and 3. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Coming right back, America, with more of the penultimate day of impeachment yammering from last night. You may have missed it, but I got it for you here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. That is the Courier, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio inside the Beltway most weeks on the West Coast today, though. The Courier is when the long carbine picks off all the French and the Native Americans who are trying to scalp the Courier. We later find out the Courier didn't make it, but it's a heck of a scene from the movie The Last of the Mohicans, in my top 5 movies ever. Daniel Day-Lewis playing the long carbine. I am the long carbine of reason and have been forever. And the long carbine of reason is here to tell you, you ought to go watch what I just posted. Senator Tom Cotton in the Senate Armed Services Committee speaking clearly and decisively about Wuhan coronavirus, the new coronavirus. Shut it down. No flights from China. Fred Barnes went a little bit farther and said no flights from Asia. I think you actually can adjust that depending on where they're coming. Japan doesn't bother me right now. Thailand, maybe. It depends on where it is and where it isn't. But quarantine when you get here. Friends at March Air Force Base saying a prayer for you. It's got to be uncomfortable. It's got to screw up your life. It's not your fault. Hope you feel good. Hope you don't have the virus. Rest of the country needs you to stay there. I would recommend The Great Influenza as a book. The Great Influenza is going to give you a little lesson in how bad it can get, how quickly when we don't have the tools available and a new virus appears. And that was in 1918 to 1920. Right? The Great Influenza is by John Barry, Barry. It's the epic story of the deadliest plague. Actually, the deadliest plague in history that we have recorded because there were so many more people. I mean, we had the plagues of the Great Middle Ages, etc., but there were more people to kill in 1918 and 1920. And John Barry's book, The Great Influenza, is the one that George W. Bush used to carry around. And I'm listening to it, and I would recommend you read it or listen to it. And then you'll understand why some of us say, it's a matter of time till you get one of these things. And then you've just got to act quickly to get the scientists everything they need to produce the antivirals that they can produce and the vaccines that they will produce. And in the meantime, you've got to be aggressive on the public health side and use quarantine. And if you don't, in 1918, they ended up with a minimum of 20 million dead people, more than the Great War. Some estimates in Barry's book say 50 million people. They couldn't count because, of course, they didn't know when it got to Africa. And it started, does anyone know where it began? Generalissimo, it's called the Spanish flu. Do you know where it began?
Is this a Grant's Tomb question?
No, it's not.
Spain?
Kansas.
Of course.
People don't know that. The first national government to report the influenza epidemic was Spain. That's why it's called the Spanish flu. Epidemiologists believe it began in Kansas and then went to an army base, and from the army base spread via troop ships headed to Europe in the Great War and then all across Europe and then went round and round the globe. And it's just chilling. That's why when you're well read about this stuff, you say, well, I'm glad it's not here. I feel bad for China. Amazon's going to do great big business because people are going to start not going out. Tour groups are going to not come from China. There are going to be economic impacts, which is why, and that's why we need to get this stupid impeachment thing open. Pat Cipollone, White House counsel, last night, cut number 30.
Democratic side. That's a reason why you shouldn't have an impeachment. Speaker Pelosi was right when she said that. Unfortunately, she didn't follow her own advice. We've never been in a situation where we have the impeachment of a president in an election year with the goal of removing the president from the ballot. As I've said before, that is the most massive election interference we've ever witnessed. It's domestic election interference. It's political election interference, and it's wrong. They don't talk about the horrible consequences to our country of doing that. But they would be terrible. They would tear us apart for generations, and the American people wouldn't accept it.
And they wouldn't. And I want you to hear Senator Rick Scott on Fox News last night, cut number 11.
Good morning. Aren't you tired? I mean, this has gone on forever. I mean, there's not. We spent 8 hours yesterday doing Q&A. Nothing. There is nothing new. We just get to hear Adam Schiff lie and rant and stuff like that. Ask for more witnesses when it was actually his job, and he decided not to do it.
That's Rick Scott, cut number 6, Senator David Perdue on Fox News last night.
Well, let's clarify that. What I said was any witnesses that are already in the record, there's 17 witnesses that the House called, they haven't even requested any of those witnesses. And so my view is if we wanted to clarify something from an existing witness, that's fine. There's no they've already done depositions and so forth. What I'm saying is we can't go outside the scope of what we've been given. Our charge in the Senate is to rule on the articles that have been brought to us. These two articles, as we've heard over and over this week after 8 scintillating days here, is that the articles are not impeachable. And more than that, the House managers have not proven their case.
It's over. Finish it today, Senator McConnell, please. And get to coronavirus. I'll come back with Larry Arnn. It's the Hillsdale Dialogue. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. That music means it's the last radio hour of the week. A very long week indeed it has been. That means the Hillsdale Dialogue is upon us. Once a week we try and go big, go to an issue that actually transcends the week, the month, the year, indeed sometimes the decade. And I do it usually with Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are collected at hillsdale.edu. You ought to go there right now and sign up for the free speech digest, which they send snail mail the old-fashioned way to millions of people every month at hillsdale.edu. Find Imprimis, sign up for it. Watch any of their many wonderful online courses. And then every one of our Hillsdale dialogues dating back to 2013 collected at hughforhillsdale.com. We have been in the... Good morning, Dr. Arnn. Good to have you.
How you doing, Hugh?
I am great. We have been involved in a series. I don't know if I want to call it serendipitous, but well-timed, on China and the United States. And we were set today to conclude that series, and we're going to, by talking about the next 50 years in great power competition. But here we find ourselves, Dr. Arnn, with China in the grip of a deadly virus, and our friend Senator Tom Cotton urging all flights from China be shut down, and Singapore closing its borders to all Chinese. So we didn't plan it this way, but it sure has worked out that the headlines and history collide again.
Isn't that something? Yeah, and our friend Senator Cotton is once again seeing ahead.
He is. He's way ahead on people on this. And it's not because he's an alarmist, it's because he reads.
Yeah. You know, they've, I think there might be 20 cities in China that are more populous than New York.
Yep.
And this virus is rampaging through one of them, which means just huge number of people. And 40 million people are quarantined?
Yeah.
So how do you, think of the problem it constitutes. I know a serious doctor, a great doctor, he practices at the Cleveland Clinic, and he also acts or practices for the King of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia was going to go to Bali. The king was going to go to Bali, and they were getting ready for it, and they had built an airstrip for his plane on that island. And then the bird flu broke out there. This is a few years ago. And so they had doctors from, fancy doctors from Saudi Arabia and other places planning whether he could go. And they had a long plan. And then at the end of it, this man is a preventive medicine doctor. We think we can protect him. And then they looked at him and they said, "What do you think?" And he said, 800 people are going. You have to protect all of them. And so he didn't go.
He didn't go. By the way, I should note that when you said a great doctor who practices at the Cleveland Clinic, you were being redundant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. I think I can't say his name because he doesn't want me to, but I know him pretty well, and he's epidemiology is a serious thing, because everybody he said even if you protect the king, you've got a whole nation to protect.
Yeah, Doctor,
all come back here.
I have been listening to a terrific book called The Great Influenza by John Barry, Barry, on the influenza of 1918 to 1920, which killed minimum 20 million people, probably killed 50 million people, because of troop movements. It began in our friend Mike Pompeo's home state of Kansas. It started in Kansas and went via the Army base there. Agriculture, pigs, cows, moves to human beings, moves to the general population, goes around the world on troop ships, and 20 million people minimum die. They are not to be trifled with. It's been 100 years. On average, it looks like about every 100 years a plague comes. I don't know how you can overreact to that threat.
Yeah. And, the other thing is, what's the harm of stopping all flights to China? Well, there is significant harm, but it's not a body count. And so that if you can do it, you should do it.
It's economic harm. And I mean, you have an endowment like I do. I'm the president of the Nixon Foundation. I have to look at the endowment. And you're the president of Hillsdale College. You've got to look at the endowment. We don't want the market to get hurt. But that's going to happen. You just hold on to your money and you let it pass, and all those companies will rebound. So the economic hit is inevitable, but you don't actually want to do anything that is indifferent to the threat, right?
That's right.
All right. So we have that covered. Though that takes us back to China where we were supposed to go. Before this arose, how were you planning to open the conversation about China as a great power competitor?
Well, I think the most important thing to do is to look at where it is, and you can see a lot by looking at a map of China. It's located on the sea, and it's huge, and it's the most populous nation on Earth, and the great threats that we faced in the past have come from landlocked powers, the great foreign threats we've had. And so it changes things. And so if we think that we're going to have a competition with them and there's going to be hostility because of that competition for a long time, and I very much do think that, then you have to actually even begin by thinking about what would war look like, because that's the ultimate damper. If they, I don't think that they intend to attack the United States of America, although they might do it in the spirit that Japan did. But I think that they will be thinking, and we must be thinking, what would it be like if we fought them?
Now, when you say they might do it in the spirit that Japan did, I understand that. Will you explain that for the Steelers fans?
Yeah, Japan was never deluded into thinking that it was going to conquer the United States and occupy it, or that it was even going to fight significant continuing battles on its territory. We're just too big and too far away. They attacked Pearl Harbor for the specific reason of crippling our fleet, so we couldn't mess with them in the part of the world that they wish to dominate, which, wonder of wonders, turns out to be the same part of the world that China is interested in dominating.
And they wish to dominate, correct me, of course, and you will if I'm wrong. They wish to dominate because of resource constraints. They concern themselves primarily, as any ruler will, with their people. Their people needed resources. Japan was resource constrained in the 30s, and they believed that the United States was an impediment to their acquisition of the resources that they needed. Thus, they struck in a surprise at Pearl Harbor. So what you're suggesting about China, the great threat there is preemptive attack in order to allow them to go in search of the resources they need unopposed.
And that's the same strategic problem as Japan. And I amend what I said a little bit. Japan was not our major foe, although an extremely costly foe in the Second World War, but Japan is a sea power, and Germany was the main one. Remember, add to what you said about resource constraints. You look at what kind of government you must have. To quote Churchill in the Munich speech, but you must look at the character of the Nazi regime and the rule which it implies. So these are Japan, Imperial Japan. Thank God, not anymore Japan, and current China are built upon a principle of domination.
They are, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that. I have to ask you a quick question before the break. Have you and the wonderful Mrs. Arnn gone to see Jojo Rabbit yet?
No.
It is nominated for Best Picture. It is about a 10-year-old in 1945 Germany belonging to Hitler Youth. And it is excellent. And there is, you will enjoy a few Churchill jokes that reflect the propaganda in Germany at the time about Winston Churchill. He was not Hitler's favorite guy.
No, they didn't get on.
And so you'll find the aside, you'll pay very close attention to this movie, but we don't often think of the plight of the resistance in Germany, of the honorable Germans, or of children in Germany forced into the... We don't often think of it from that perspective, but it was pretty awful.
Yeah. Well, Churchill called Hitler Little Corporal Schicklgruber.
Oh, that must have burned. So, Jojo Rabbit is the name of the movie. Do they have theaters in Michigan?
Yeah, they do. They're outdoor theaters because it's so balmy up here compared to Ohio.
It's balmy. I'll be right back. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. It's the weekly Hillsdale Dialogue. We're going to define for you what a great power competition is. Then we're going to talk with you about how the United States ought best to prepare for it with the People's Republic of China. Doesn't mean war. Does mean clarity. I'll be right back with one of the people who bring clarity, Dr. Larry Arnn of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. You're listening to the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I have got to bring this up. I'm joined by Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are located at hillsdale.edu. I have just tweeted out the cover of the Telegraph this morning, their website. The inside story of the Telegraph and Brexit. It is Brexit Day. It is a day of historical significance in the history of the United Kingdom, which is very important in Dr. Arnn's life, if only because he married a wonderful Brit, Penny Arnn. And there is, Dr. Arnn, on this a few pictures. It says the inside story of the Telegraph and Brexit. It has Margaret Thatcher, Theresa May, David Cameron, Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, and I can't tell who the sixth person is. I don't know who it would be. But this is a major day. This is the last day that Great Britain, the United Kingdom, is in the European Union.
Yeah, that's it's worth commenting on the fact that there's a lesson here, and the lesson is the person who has made this possible. There are actually two people. Nigel Farage, who's the head of what's now called the Brexit Party, could never have done this on his own because he doesn't really even want to be prime minister. I happen to know him. He just wants to get out of Europe, and he was not the kind of guy that they would elect. So he needed somebody, because he did put the Conservative Party in a position where they had to schedule the referendum, and the British people have done the rest. And then who's going to bring it to a head? Because it turns out that if you're fighting a bureaucracy, it's like fighting a marshmallow. You whack it, and your hand goes in, you can't get it out again. And so they just made mincemeat of Theresa May, and they couldn't get it done. Well, then somebody came along, and he just had an entire Now, by the way, they're spending the day. Boris Johnson is spending the day declaring his new platform today. But that's they're going to use the celebration to launch their next campaign for the next victory parade. But Boris Johnson, basically for about a year, he didn't have anything else to say except the people have voted, get out of Europe.
Yep.
And he's resolute, and he's like our president. He's not the kind of guy that you elect in normal times. And he's different from the president. He's very colorful, and he's very indiscreet, and he's very learned, and, he's got all that, too. And he looks a little bit, they call him pixie-ish or clownish. Prime ministers look like Neville Chamberlain,
Yep.
Except when they're Winston Churchill.
Or Boris Johnson.
Yeah, that's right. And so he's an odd guy for this job. He just has the capacity. Victor Hansen gave a great talk on the campus this week. And what is it about these great generals, he said. And he said, well, there are two things. One is when there's a war, they know what to do. And when the war's over, you don't really want them around anymore. So, I don't know what'll happen to Trump or Boris Johnson, except that they were people for this moment, and they just had a clearer view, and and another thing that's, it takes nerve, because to bank everything on one thing, and to have the discipline to do that, almost nobody has that discipline. Our college is boring in its repetitiveness. We've got this thing. We started 175 years ago. It's beautiful. It connects to everything else. It lets us talk about everything else. But everything's got to start in the same place. And that messes you up in various ways, because it means you can't be a chameleon. You can't, Well, great politicians are like that, too. They, over time, as things shift on, they may change their emphasis. But in the middle of a crisis, they've got one thing, and it's connected to their abiding emphasis. So that's what happened there. That's why that came to be. And nobody has ever left the European Union.
No, they haven't. They have never left the European Union until today, when they are. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about Britain and France, the really first great power competition with which we as Americans were involved, and then the great power competition that looms with the People's Republic of China. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The music and the timing suggest we're in the Hillsdale Dialogue, that hour of the week in which I am joined usually by Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, or one or many of his colleagues there, to discuss an issue that actually transcends the week, the month, the year. And today we're talking about the United States and China and the great power competition that looms in front of us for the next 50 years. And Dr. Arnn, before I retreat to Britain and France and their long struggle through history's many centuries, what do you mean by great power competition?
Well, sometimes it happens in life that there are a couple, and in some an occasion or two, there's always more than two, but a couple of powers, and they're the preeminent power, and they have ways of becoming at odds with each other. You mentioned before the break Britain and France. That's the classic modern one. Rome and Carthage. Athens and Sparta, all the Greeks and Persia. You can even start there. That's the first really well-recorded one. And what was that like? You know, that went on for, 70 years, 80 years. There was a battle. At Marathon, and then there was a war, and the Greeks won it. But that wasn't the end of it. The Persians intervened in the Peloponnesian War, which was, by the time it was over, about 40 years after the end of the Greek-Persian War. And they're great, and they're strong, and they're near each other enough so that they come into conflict all the time. The great expression for the Persian question in Greece, it was referred to, for a generation before there was a war, the phobos, the fear. That's what that word phobia means. It comes from the Greek word for fear. The phobos is on everybody's mind, and it, stayed on their minds, and sure enough, it erupted in trouble. And it's partly because when they came into conflict, it was apparent that they just meant different things in the world, and they had interests that clashed. So that's what it means.
Now, in terms of the modern setting, I referred to Great Britain and France. I could also have referred to the United States and Great Britain. The former, Great Britain and France, led to endless conflict for many centuries. The latter, where the United States was the rising power and Great Britain the falling power, did not lead to a war between the two. There are many books about China out right now. Dr. Kissinger has on China. Graham Allison, the great professor at Harvard, has the Thucydides trap. Means the title is actually Destined for War. The subtitle is the Thucydides trap. Michael Pillsbury has the 100-year marathon. Robert Kaplan has the Asia's cauldron. They're all about China being a risen power and the United States being the dominant power and what has happened in the past. Allison said this has happened 16 times in history. They run the Thucydides project at Harvard. Of those 16 times when there has been a great power and a rising power that challenges, 12 times there has been a great conflict. You mentioned a few of them. 4 times there has not been an armed conflict, one of those being Great Britain and the United States. Why did France and Great Britain simply find it impossible to get along for centuries?
They really didn't like each other.
If it were only that simple.
Yeah, no.
Because they, by the way, during the war, they would just go back and forth all the time. They would send their diplomats and their scientists would travel unmolested back and forth between Paris and London.
Well, they were, that's a very interesting pair. By the way, we should remind our listeners that we fought 2 wars with Great Britain and many skirmishes along the way.
Yes.
And the reason there wasn't a great war with Winston Churchill with Great Britain is because of the attitudes of Winston Churchill, which were advanced but representative. Winston Churchill actually thought it inevitable that we were going to supplant them as the greatest power. He wanted to be our partner and make us better, and then together we could be the greatest power. Why? Because there wasn't that difference, ultimately, of the direction of the 2 countries. And they saw that. And that doesn't always work, but this is a rare case where it did work. And so that's why that didn't happen. And we did together the great conflicts in the 2 world wars. We were together in those wars. And that's
Which is why it's so hard to understand the French and German animosity when you see a film like 1917 and the French and the British are fighting and dying by the millions together in desperate charges across tortured lands brought about by Queen Victoria's grandson, the Kaiser. You just want, why does this happen? Why do great powers have to collide?
Well, so Churchill liked to say that wars often begin on small occasions, but never for small reasons. And so there was something going on that was an abiding problem. It's easy to state in regard to France and Germany. Germany, which is a modern country, right? It was founded in the late 19th century through war, and its problem, its outlook on the world was there's a bunch of German-speaking Germanic states, and they're different principalities, and they're right in the heart of Europe. They're right in the middle, and they're landlocked. And they're surrounded by people who are not like them. They don't speak the same language, and such. And so they fear, right? They don't have room. They can be attacked from both sides. And so in the 19th century, Bismarck and his boss, Kaiser Wilhelm I, they embarked on a campaign to unite all the German states into a single power. And they did. They succeeded. They waged war on some of the German states, on France, and they defeated it. And then they had a party in the Palace of Versailles and declared their victory in the war and the unification of Germany at the same time. Now, these two places are now looking at each other, big, strong powers side by side, and those same apprehensions drive things, right? They have conflicts over imperial questions, over trade, and they're alike each other in some important ways, right? Big land powers, lots of territory. Germany is a landlocked power, France is not. And by the way, that's what drove the French fight with the British. And so they just keep conflicting, and it need not have, because that's just a situation, right? That's not going to go away. But Churchill's view of things like this is it could be managed, and he loved Bismarck. Bismarck was a great man. He was also a very ruthless man, and Bismarck, immediately after he conquered France, took part of its territory, which he was reluctant to do. Immediately made a treaty with France and with Russia, the great power on the other side of Germany, and he conducted himself modestly for the rest of his career against those two people. And if that had continued, there's no reason why they would have had to fight. But it come to find out, the next generation, William I and his the Kaiser, William II, the Kaiser during the First World War. During the First World War, he was. I always like to say he's got the classic rich kid syndrome. He inherited a whole bunch of stuff, but he didn't have to understand how to keep it, and so he was too aggressive. And if he had,
have you read Robert Massey's Dreadnought?
Yeah,
great portrait of the Kaiser. Wanting very much the approval of his cousin Bertie. They share a grandmother in Victoria, and Bertie is her younger brother and the King of England. And it appears to me that the Kaiser, who was born with a birth deformity on his right arm, that he always felt this is a psychologically driven war.
Well, it was, great nations have impulses in them, and they're always connected to what keeps them together. Because you just have to think, a nation is like everything that has being. Now we'll have some Aristotle. There's something that holds it together. What it is. A rock and concrete are made of similar material, but something holds it together to make it what it is. And nations are like that. When you see a bunch of people and they're a nation, you can look around and see what makes these people, because they're just people. Why are these people in a nation? And so there's differences of outlook and interest among nations, Lincoln, every nation has a central idea from which all its minor thoughts radiate, right?
Huh.
And our idea is
Freedom.
equality.
I was going to say freedom.
Yeah, well, equality and liberty, right? And what are we? What? In what way are we equal? Equal in our entitlement to our freedom.
Yes.
And so that, but with the very strong thing that separated us from Britain, consent of the governed. A great and civil man, a wonderful man, Russell Kirk. He wrote that the Declaration of Independence was not a characteristic American document. It was really written to impress the French court. Do you think the King of France read that thing and thought that's a great idea?
when we come back from break, we're going to have to talk about the essential difference between the United States and the People's Republic of China, which Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is out talking to the Brits about today, is that they have no attachment to equality or freedom. None at all. What do they have an attachment to, Dr. Arnn, as we head into break?
It's like the great movie Fiddler and Play, Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition.
Tradition. And that tradition is not one of equality and freedom.
It grows from family, right? And so it makes them a people in a different way than we are a people.
And we'll talk about what that means for great power competition when we come back. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. Don't go anywhere, except to two different places, honorboundcoffee.com. If you're going to drink coffee in the morning, drink coffee that supports the military families out there, honorboundcoffee.com, 100% of their profits, 100% of their profits go to support charitable groups that serve the military. They're beginning with the Semper Fi Fund. They will adopt more. Honorboundcoffee.com, brought to you by the same people who have done very well with ReliefFactor.com, Pete and Seth Talbot. And they have come and said, start with us on this, and I'm more than happy to because I trust these guys. I've known them for a long time. I know ReliefFactor.com. I take it every morning. I did in the first hour. I'm about to remind you to take yours. But I'm also signing up for honorboundcoffee.com because I drink coffee every morning in the studio and every day on the weekend. And when I do and when I sip it, I want to thank the profits from this coffee, which is wonderful coffee, by the way. There are 4 different roasts, 4 different kinds, including decaf if you're one of those funny people. Honorboundcoffee.com. Go, try it. You'll love it. And then don't forget ReliefFactor.com. The weekend is upon us. You may be out there doing your weekend. It's February 1st tomorrow, Rabbit Day. When you wake up for good luck, rabbit. But it's also the day you get to renew your New Year's resolution that you did not keep, especially if it comes to exercise. It's a Saturday. It's like a free day, a chance to restart your New Year's resolution. And ReliefFactor.com could be one of those if you go and order it right now at ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. And then you can run the 10 miles you intend. Don't do that if you haven't done that recently. You can run the 1 mile. You can walk the 5. You can do an 8-mile slog, a trundle as I call it, if you're no longer fast. But you can get out there and enjoy the gym or just restart your New Year's resolution, but do it with ReliefFactor.com. Support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. ReliefFactor.com on Super Bowl weekend. My final segment with Dr. Larry Arnn is coming up. Don't go anywhere, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, wrapping up this week's Hillsdale Dialogue on Great Power Competition, the United States and China edition, with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All of these conversations are found at hillsdale.edu. Next week, I hope Dr. Arnn and I will be talking about the now concluded, hopefully it will be concluded by next week, impeachment trial of President Trump. But this week I want to finish with thoughts on the looming competition with China. And by competition, we do not mean war, Dr. Arnn, but clear-eyed, we do have to look at the United States versus China in the lens that we have examined great power competitions in the past. What ought the United States and what ought you to advise your students to think about in order to prepare for that?
Well, the most urgent thing is to understand us and what makes us work and what makes us strong so we can be independent and keep working. And it's more important to do that than it is to study anything else as regards, temporal things. And then the second thing is, what about them? How do they behave? What moves them? What makes them go? And intelligent people, I believe that China is led by people who are very intelligent. Intelligent people do not want big wars. They're terrible, and they're also terribly unpredictable. And so I think that's one of Michael Pillsbury and also Bill Gertz, another guy who writes very well on China military stuff. I think that's what they say, right?
Correct.
They're and that's what, Churchill, that's what Churchill said about the Soviet Union. They do not want war. What they do want is the fruits of war without fighting it. And so if they think of themselves as the greatest people on earth, and in some respects surely they are, and then since they're located where they are, on the Eurasian landmass, it's obvious that, and that means 65% of the people, and add in Africa, that gets about 80% of the people in the world, are near them one way or another.
Yep.
And they're not like the Soviet Union. They're not trapped in the middle of the Eurasian continent. They're on one end of it. And they can get out to sea, and they have in the past got out to sea and gone around the world with naval power, military naval power. And so it's just easy to see what they need to do. They need to deny us strength in Asia. And they're too far away from Europe on the other side of the Eurasian continent to deny us strength there, but to deny us strength on the, in the Pacific Rim. And that's where most of the production in the world is now. And so the way they do that is they build things that keep us from projecting power near them. And that means our friends. And see, it's just amazing how much American strategic policy, when it's smart, has followed the British Empire strategic policy when it was smart. Our friends are along the coasts of all the continents, and it's easier for us to get to them, and we're a naval power. And because of the way the world has changed, the world hasn't actually changed. What's happened is it's always been true that most of the land and most of the people live in Eurasia and Africa, and now they've caught up a lot, and they're powerful. And so we need to think of ourselves as Great Britain off the coast of the great power. And because technology has changed so much, the oceans are not nearly as wide as they used to be.
No, they are not. And missiles are not nearly as limited as they once were.
And you got a kid in the Navy? The Navy is important. And the Air Force is important. And the Marines are important. Because our friends, those are the main arms of the military that we have to get to them. And, of course, the Army's important, but one hopes they don't come into play in a big way. And that means pay attention to, just picture a map of Asia or the Pacific coast of Asia. Picture a map, right? And it starts down there with Indonesia or Puerto Rico, and then, the Philippines. And then it goes, you've got Japan, Taiwan, and Korea.
Malaysia and Singapore.
And those are all big places in the war with Japan that we fought, right? And it's the same places today. And we ought to be friends with those people, and we ought to reinforce them. And that's a way, because, you don't
And
have
of
to
course,
fight
the
them over
great
that.
undertaking of the United Kingdom, Australia.
That's it. And Australia. It's funny. The population of Australia is it's more dispersed now than it used to be, but it's located on the east coast of Australia, far away from Japan and all that. And what's in the middle of Australia is like what's in the middle of America, except more desert. There's not much.
Not much.
And so they, it was a challenge to defend Australia and New Zealand against Japan, and yet they, in an amazing, magnificent tribute to them, had the patience and the courage to send significant parts of their army all the way around the world to Europe to fight in the war in Europe in the beginning, in the first half of the Second World War.
And the reason I want to end here is because Dr. Arnn's message about great competition, if I can summarize it, it's the Allies, stupid. Am I right, Dr. Arnn? It's the Allies. Larry Arnn is my friend and my guest. All Hillsdale dialogues collected at HughforHillsdale.com. All things Hillsdale are found at Hillsdale.edu. And you'll find us here next week talking about whatever happens today and tomorrow, hopefully the end of impeachment madness and the corralling of coronavirus. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thank you for listening, America.